Well, hello,
Hello.
everyone. This is long overdue.
Over
You know,
over a month.
this was in the works, in the plans, the moment we won. But we just had to let the win marinate. Let everybody sit on it, forget what happened, and now we are here to remind you exactly what happened. Go through the legacy of Wings, Rose, all that.
I would have loved to have
I,
this come out after the DPL awards, but that shit's never coming out.
the DPL awards have been forgotten about, but we about to let the people know. You know what I'm saying? So, first off,
And it's only fitting that we start with, season 5, Rose Garrison, because that's where it all
yep.
started.
Oh wait, we need to make sure everybody knows who's who. This is Rye,
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm Sean.
sir. And so we're about to take you through, how we went from Rose and being down bad to going to Wings and winning the chip. We're going to take you through the entire history, our drafting plans, the replays, the good moments, the bad moments, all that.
Yeah, we'll probably go through Rose a little bit quicker than Wings, but good to get that
It's
history
essential
in.
to the story. Yeah, it's essential to the story.
Yeah, so why don't we move on to the Rose Garrison roster. So this was our roster for season 5 of the Draft Premier League. You can see we included what our final record was and then who was on the team and how they performed overall that season. Some of these records are a bit deceiving as only 3 of these members are from the original.
Before we dive into the records, let's just discuss how we came together as a captain pair.
Yeah.
This was the first time that me and Sean had ever captained together, even though, of course, we've known each other for a long time. And I always said that if I captained in DPL, it would be with Sean. And so this was the season that we finally came together and tried our hand. And I would say overall we had a pretty good, solid start. I think that definitely some misplays, definitely some things that we failed on, could have done better. But of course, we know that that gets improved upon and rectified later. But yeah, overall, this was the beginning of everything, beginning of our captaincy, and yeah.
Yeah, I know for Rye, he had captain a couple times before this, but this was my first time ever being a captain, and I guess this was the season where I slowly learned this is probably the best role for myself. I feel like it was just bigger advantage to me to enjoy this game, plus to be able to provide team support at a high competitive level, and give me an opportunity to learn even more, especially from some of the best in this format.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that I wanted to captain was I think that in the previous season, just being on RHV, Rocking with Berzions, and essentially assuming the captain role, I just realized that I have the potential to be good at it, and I liked being able to, I guess, be the director of things and have my influence over the people who I draft. So I think I was very much suited for this type of position. But yeah, and also I think that just in general, me and Sean are so good as a captain core just because, number one, we know each other's like how to build, and we're so familiar with like just how we operate as players in this game. And Sean is very much a support-minded person. I'm very much a player-minded person, so it just goes hand in hand. But yeah, now we can dive into the records.
But yeah, so this was our final roster at the end of season 5, but it is not even close to what the original auction team was.
Yeah, the original auction was. The thing is, first, every season that we've done so far. So the 2 that we've done pre-auction, me and Sean go crazy with the docs and like scouting and trying to get all the people who we consider drafting, and we actually did a lot of work for this season 5, and I would say we had a little bit of, I guess, bias, towards what had worked previously in the previous seasons, and I think that kind of it affected our judgment of what really would work best for our team. I don't know if you want to dive into how our team was looking before we had these players on our screen, but
yeah, I can dive into it. So the first 3 players outside of Ryan and myself that you see were the only original members of the pre-mids team that we had, which was Habida, Silver Smasher, and Devin.
All positive.
Yeah, all positive. Not one. It's one of the reasons they remained on the team, but not entirely that reason. Yeah, our pre-mids team consisted of those 3 plus King L5, Blitzberg, Money Guy, Austrian George. Who are the other 2? I'm forgetting. Ollie and Endless Gadgets. Those were our. That was our original roster, and then through trades and drops, we dropped those 6 and got these 5 in return, which were Roar, Pyronox, Jacko, GCS, and Hacker.
Yeah, and I feel like this is so. This mids was so important, just because I know beforehand our team was, I think, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Before the end, like, we were honestly, a lot of our weeks were very close, and I think me and Sean realized that we really needed some more, I guess, reliable players, and also just more activity overall, and like people who we could trust to, like, just get the builds done and like be active to win their own matches at least. So that's kind of why we ended up going towards these players. I remember it was a huge commotion trying to get all these people, just because we essentially dropped majority of our roster to get these new players. And I know, like, it was just a lot. I know I was DMing captains and going under the table trying to get all the players together.
Yeah, I had no idea any of this was happening. He just pulls up and it's like, we have a trade for us.
Yeah. But I think that overall, we ended up way stronger, though, afterwards at post mids. Even though, of course, you see we have some players who were negative and didn't get wins at all. I think that overall our team just became way more solid and cohesive and more motivated and active to win. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to add that probably my biggest issue with the pre-mids roster was, again, like the activity. I don't think I was as active as I was pre-mids any other part of either of these 2 DPL seasons. The amount of effort we had to put in to secure that certain builds were completed. For the most part, it was a group effort to make singular builds for individuals. And it wasn't just one, like it was maybe around half of the roster.
Just to let everyone know how much work Sean put in for this team. He had about 24.7k messages. This guy was grinding. I swear we were in calls every night trying to make teams. We were putting in so much effort with very little reward.
Yeah, a lot of that really tough. A lot of that preseason was Ryan and I with Habida in call with us, and Darkrai. Darkrai was one of our team support, and he was very pivotal actually to the success that we had that season. I don't think without him we could have been remotely 3-4.
Oh yeah, Darkrai was the shadow 8th man.
Yeah,
he was there, present, helping us all the time.
Yeah, he was definitely an honorary team member that season. But yeah, I think once we made those mids trades, our team definitely improved. Even though we only went 2-2 post mids with that team, some things didn't quite go our way. That's just the nature of the game, and yeah, just not much we could have done outside of that. But I'm still proud of how we adjusted from the initial auction into the mids transactions. I will say that we definitely understood how we wanted to construct the roster and like what we wanted from our entire team, due to how how that we've in a sense failed or didn't excel in the initial auction. We used like all of our.
Just to make it clear, we just barely missed playoffs.
Yeah, but by one game.
Yeah.
But yeah, we took all of those like mistakes, used as a way to learn, and I think we definitely executed it well in season 6. In my opinion, I think we definitely were one of the best auctioners that season.
I was gonna say, I would say that because people may be wondering why are we covering this previous season as it's not really relevant anymore. But I think it was so pivotal to how we operated come season 6. I think not only did it affect our drafting, like our auctioning skills, it also improved our drafting skills, like actual drafting of mons and all that. I think because in this season we had very, very terrible teams.
Yeah.
Especially for Sword and Shield. I don't even recall our Sword and Shield overall record, but it was very bad pre-mids.
It might have been like 3-6 or like 2-7.
We were very down bad. And I think that this was just so important because it taught us like how important it is to get other very knowledgeable people about drafting other than ourselves, and also as well kind of being a little bit more hands-on when it comes to drafting and not really I don't want to call it dictators, like being like a dictator, but almost like follow as a captain. You have to follow what you believe when it comes to drafting, because ultimately it's your team. So I think I very much learned that, and it became very much important later on down the line. But
yeah.
Also, and I guess I was gonna say, just to kind of close out this chapter, the beginning of the story, we can talk about basically how we ended up keeping 3 of the, was it 3?
Yeah, 3.
Wait, no.
Yeah, 3. 3 of the original 9.
Oh wait, no. We ended up keeping 2 of the players for next season.
Oh,
that's kind of what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd also like to just add, like, obviously you can see the
Silver. Shout out Silver. If he was here, we would have had it. But
just to go back to, like, you see the records on your screen. Obviously they can tell one story, but one of the big notable records on the screen is probably Jacko being 0-6. He was the person we traded directly with King L5 at mids, and he was already obviously winless before he came here. That record is not indicative of how good Jack was as a player. He just could not find his stride that season, and his confidence obviously dropped as the losses kept piling on. Just want to give a little homie shout out that, you know, Jack is still one of the best in the game, and that record is not indicative of how you go. Yeah.
Also want to highlight my guy Pyronox.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3 of his losses were not with us, by the way. And that guy was very, very good. Come post mids when we had him, and that guy's a beast.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Same with Roar. I think Roar was 3-0 on our team as well. Everyone kind of popped off post mids. It's just we were a little bit unfortunate. The main culprit was obviously Rye. You can see.
Oh yeah. Man. Anyways, let's I would say this is a good segue into diving into how our mindset was going into the next season, and when it came to drafting, and what our plans were, what we wanted to do, all that.
Yeah, so after this season, I think we immediately knew we wanted to return, obviously with a rebranding, because the Rose Garrison clearly can't win, so we gotta bring something else in, something more, I guess, powerful.
Something with some more fire.
Yeah, fire. Decided to rebrand to the Wings of Wrath, and as you can see, this was our roster going into DPL Season 6, and that consisted of Habada, Devin, Emil, Bronson, Aster J, Brian, K-Crick, and Sablo.
So, okay, I think the first thing I want to touch on is just how we decided upon getting a lot of these players pre-auction. I think that this is a rare case where pretty much everyone that we had set out to get, we got, which is already just I think, a precursor to how well we were going to do during the season, just because our drafting plans had went so well. But I know that just beforehand, just all the work we did and all the planning, me and Sean, we had going forward with this new team, we knew that we wanted to keep players like Habada and Devin from our old team because they were so consistent and did so well for us.
Very active as well.
They were very active and very key to our success. But of course, you know, those are only 2 people. They aren't going to be. They aren't the only. I guess ways for us to win.
So we definitely wanted new people, but we obviously wanted part of our original core intact. And obviously, we lost Silver because he retired between season 5 and 6. So we had to look for our new ORAS main, I guess, in a way.
Yep. So I think the most notable thing first was a little bit before auction. I don't know if you want to talk about this, Sean, because I feel like you communicated with him more.
Yeah,
we had the sign up from Mr. K-Crick himself.
Yeah, he reached out to me probably a couple days before the auction, saying that he was getting the itch to play. And I basically told him, like, hey, if you're confident that you're going to be, you know, active enough for your own games and you're going to try and put in that effort, and you really want to play, you can sign up. Obviously, I value K-Crick as one of the best players in the game, and even though he hadn't played in a while, having coming out of retirement, I considered him a very valuable member to pick up if he did sign up, due to his ability to draft in this format. I think he's one of the best drafters, if not the best drafter I have seen in this format. I respect his drafting opinions. I put him at a very high pedestal. So I knew if I wanted to, I told her I wanted to get him, not just because he was obviously a consistent top player, but I think the reason we suffered so much last season was due to our poor drafts, especially in Sword and Shield. And I knew we needed someone who could provide more insight into our drafting process, help us draft. Because not only are we gonna like have him help us draft, we want to learn and pick his brain. So I would say he definitely was a big part in obviously our success down the line this season with the drafting process.
And
yeah,
you forgot to mention just the long-standing history of me, Sean, and K-Craig. Number one, we were all teammates back in season 2 of ZOG. And so this was like basically a reunion that was waiting to happen. I knew that we could get this guy his first championship all as a team together, and we did.
He was that's kind of the big reason he didn't want to sign up. He just didn't want to put the effort in and get 1 seed, lose again in the first round. But yeah, it's just funny this time around. We ended up being the captains, and he was the player, versus when we first played together, he was the captain and we were the first time players.
Yep. I think that's. I feel like that's what made it very much meaningful for me. Was just that right there.
Yeah. I would say I guess I'll dive deeper into like how we prepared for the auction. So I made like a document that listed basically all the players that we were interested in. Like we would write them down. We'd put like basically a price range we valued each player at, or like what we thought they might go for, and how much we were willing to spend at a maximum versus what we thought could be a minimum steal value for them. And after a while, I think the first season we tried to like create a full roster doing that, but this time I think we focused more on like a set core of like 4 to 5 players that we really wanted, and then we would figure out the bottom mid auction. We would have like players that we listed that we potentially wanted, but we wouldn't like dedicate towards those during our planning process. So I know yeah, you can go.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say the main people that we did ended up focus on getting or wanting, I guess, were obviously Habita. Devin wasn't a guarantee. I know it might hurt him to hear that, but we thought maybe his price could be spiked up because people knew we potentially might have wanted him, but we wanted him cheap. So we were kind of hesitant during the auction because he was starting to rise up. I think L5 was raising his price up a little bit.
Also, Devin had kind of been like, I guess, not doing as well in other leagues. So I know that this season was kind of far removed from the other ones, so we were kind of hesitant on how well Devin would do. But I know when I talked to him pre-auction, I knew just from talking to him that he would very much sweat for us like he did in the last season. So I was super confident in getting him and having him return.
Yeah, so we had Habita and Devin as our like core 2 from the Rose team, and then obviously we wanted K-Crick. His expertise in drafting as well as his consistent top play was also something we valued very highly. I think Habita and K-Crick were our top 2, and then if things kind of went crazy after that, we would just adjust with those 2. But then Devin was obviously factored in that like top 4 or 5 core that we wanted. And then I think the next big name that we decided to kind of just guarantee go for was Aster. And
oh yeah, I can talk a little bit about this.
Yeah.
Just so Aster had played in last season. He was, I think he was a min bid.
Yeah, he was like 5 or 6K. Yeah.
Yeah, and in my scouting, I had to do the in-depth scouting. I had to ask around because I know Aster J is of course a old player, but for me, I don't know much about him. Me nor Sean knew much about Aster, so we had to ask around. And just from inquiring about this guy from all his previous teammates, I knew right away that this would be the guy to win it all. Aster, just from talking to him pre-auction, sounded super self-sufficient, which is one thing that me and Sean were very much valuing. And his just knowledge and in-depth knowledge about the game was super valuable, as well as the fact that we were told about how helpful he is and supportive of his teammates. And I was just, that's all I needed to hear to know that this guy would be very, very good on our team, especially with our support. And he was one of the reasons why. That was some of the reasons why we ended up wanting to prioritize him and draft him.
Yeah, we weren't too sure what his price may be. We knew he would definitely spike up after last season because I think he went 3-1 or 4-1 in season 5. He had a win in finals as well, but I think that was like game 8. So I don't know how much people hold value to that. But I felt like he would definitely be more of a sleeper pickup because he was only played like 4 or 5 games the season before, and I figured if we gave him a full season, he could definitely pop off, and he for sure did, as you can see by his record. But again, yeah, it came down to like the auction price, what we thought he might be. I think on the high end, we thought he might be like 15, 17K. And I think he ended up being like 17 and a half during the auction, which I think was like the most we probably could have afforded at that point in the draft. Because I think we had...
very fortunate with his price.
Yeah, because we had Habita, Devin, K-Crick, and then obviously we had Sablo at that point as well. It was just fortunate that Sablo and Devin weren't as expensive as we thought they might be on the high end, and we were able to afford Aster, which was definitely a crucial pickup, and is definitely worth all of the money we spent. But yeah, going back to what you said earlier, you mentioned like self-sufficiency. That was probably our biggest issue in season 5, pre-mids at least. A lot of our team members, or not, I guess a few of them, like we said, we had to end up building together, build teams for them before their games happened, just due to the lack of inactivity. We wanted to make sure we could draft people who were going to be self-sufficient, build their own teams, mock for their games, not necessarily require the whole hand-holding through the entire like process. And we could only handle so much of that, given how like it quickly burns you out. And I think that was the reason why we were able to sustain as long as we did this season without like burning out, was the reduced amount of like effort we as the captains had to provide to the level that we did on the Rose Garrison. But yeah, I guess moving on from Aster, before Aster we ended up picking up Sablo as, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th member we picked up. I'm not quite sure. One of those. But Sablo was actually like really good this season.
Yeah, honestly,
we weren't
pre-auction. I didn't know anything about Sablo. I know that we had prioritized him because we really wanted a reliable ORAS player, and of course Sablo has been playing this game for a while now, for a long time. So we knew that he would be, pretty adept at playing ORAS, and he of course has grown up with the tier and knows it very well. So that was part of the reason we kind of wanted a new silver, and Sablo essentially was drafted to fill that place, and he very much did his part.
Yeah. I know on the signups he listed he can play every gen, and he had recently had a good showing in LD Masters the season before DPL started, and from there I could kind of see his ability to play at that high level in any generation. And given the strategy that we were employing in our auction, we definitely needed a higher caliber ORAS player. Initially, I will say I had some doubts about if Sablo could perform well in the ORAS tier consistently, and this man put in an exceptional amount of work every week to make sure he was prepared. Yeah, he put in a lot of work. He even he was just a great teammate overall. He mocked everyone consistently. Always made sure he was well prepared. I know he's a very nervous battler, but he was able to, I guess, push down a lot of those nervous Nelly feelings and be able to perform at a very high level consistently this season. Definitely, I would say he met or exceeded my expectations of what I thought. I thought it would be hard to match the production that Silver had on the Rose Garrison, but I think Sablo ended up finishing the same record in the regular season, so that was good to see.
Yeah. Next, moving on to Brian. We got this player, Brian, because we honestly needed a min bid, and we had known about how Brian was up and coming in the draft community, and how he was also had done pretty well in Certified. I think he played in like OOT and stuff like that. And so we kind of wanted a player who could give support and maybe not necessarily be a starter all the time, but could fill the role and do his job when needed and called upon. And Brian was basically for that place, and I'm happy we drafted him. He did work, even though his record is 1-2. He still did put in effort for his matches and did what he needed to do, and got us a crucial win as well. So.
Yeah, I know that Brian was picked up near the end of the auction. We didn't really have a whole lot of budget left to pick up certain players, but we wanted another consistent and probably reliable min bid player, and especially in Sword and Shield, I think having the depth in that tier would be beneficial down the line, because I feel like a lot of people, or I guess a lot of the teams, could end up picking Sword and Shield as their extra tier if they were to make the playoffs. And it was good for like rotating out certain players based off who we had drafted already, namely Habita, Devin, Aster. We even had Amel at that point in the draft, I think, as well. But yeah, I'm proud of what Brian was able to contribute to the team. It was a little unfortunate we couldn't get him to play in the playoffs. It was just how the team matchups ended up who we ended up playing in the playoffs, and the tiers selected didn't really allow us to do the things that we needed to do. But yeah,
it all worked out for the best though. Next up, talking about the last player, but definitely not the least. I would say, honestly, the most surprising player in terms of their results was Amel.
Funny enough, you should tell the story of.
You can go.
No, you can tell the story of how this happened.
In the auction, I think everybody knows how auctions work. You don't necessarily want to go for every player that you want right at that time that it's your pick, your nom. Sometimes you want to waste budget. And with Amo had, of course, been a player in draft, and specifically DPL in the past seasons. And he has had, I think, maybe one really great season, and I think his next season was kind of middling. But overall, Amo was well known and consistently drafted player. So I had told Sean, I said, "Oh yeah, we're about to nom this guy. Hopefully, we waste some budget. People spend big on him. But if not, we're cooling because Amo was a good player, and at this point, we were only putting in a mid bid, and so it was basically a no drawback thing, and we ended up getting Amo for $5K. And when this happened, I knew that this was already going to be shaping out very well for us, because Amo, with his just experience in DPL and his ability to take down top players like L5 and all that, I knew getting him for a min-bid pick like this would be very much beneficial for us. Amo was definitely a wild card when it comes to his play and prep, but I knew that with our help, specifically Sean's building expertise, we could rein him in, give him the good builds needed for him to succeed. And I think that was very much showcased throughout this season. And this guy went crazy, did all the work. Was honestly, if Aster J wasn't on the team, he would be the most clutch person. That's the guy. My guy, Amo. Anyways, you can go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I think during the auction, we obviously were like, oh yeah, we'll just put him in for a min bid and see what happens. We thought we were just gonna upbid someone, but clearly no one wanted him, and I think his value was greater than a min bid, so it was definitely probably the biggest steal of the season, and obviously his record just proves that. I was a bit shocked at how he ended up finishing record wise, just because I had seen probably a small sample size. I think he went like 4-1 one of the seasons maybe, and then like I think 2-4, 2-3 the season before on I think he was on TTT in season 5. But I figured like he would be a good person to get around like 4-2, 4-3 type of level, but then he kept on winning, and
each week.
Yeah, I had some people tell me that his prep was a little unconventional, and we had seen some of his games in the past where some of the sets were pretty creative, but I didn't really see a whole lot of that this season. He definitely was very receptive to criticism on builds. He took a lot of support from the team. He was definitely an amazing team player. Yeah. And I think that trust in the rest of us allowed us to communicate through builds a lot easier, and he was definitely well prepared for all of his games, and that's mainly like that, coupled with his ability just to completely outplay some of his opponents, which he did in majority of his games, aided by his solid prep. He was able to have that 6-2 record at the end of the season. And like you said, yeah, if Aster wasn't as dominant as he was, Amo probably was close to the like second MVP. He was very clutch. He would always pick up wins. I think he clinched the second most amount of series behind Aster for all of the series, like whether it be like game 4s or like series clinchers in like game 6 or 7. But yeah, I was a bit surprised on the results, but I'm very happy at the growth that I saw him he went through this season.
Yeah. Okay, now moving to Bronson. So Bronson was a mid-season pickup. Before we had a player who was very much just not really around for our team, and also didn't really know that much about draft. So when it came to mids time, I knew that we could definitely get somebody way better. And so I looked towards Bronson. Now, I think everybody knows the reputation of Bronson, the most clutch player. The guy has, some would say, maybe an ego, but at the same time, the guy wins games when it matters most. And so I knew with Bronson sitting there in mids, it was funny was everybody was so against getting Bronson initially. I had to convince them because I saw the future. I knew this guy when the time called for him, he would be there. He would answer the call and win us the games when he needed to, when he was called upon. So yeah, Bronson, very much happy that we picked him up during mid-season. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Sean.
Yeah, Rye is known for having these very, I guess...
I got the foresight.
Foresight, as he calls it. He's very good at scouting players for the roles that we need on the team. Perfect example of that was Devin in Season 5. Obviously, Devin had been picked up before in other tours, but I think Devin... it was a player that we knew that we could basically get better throughout the season, and that would contribute to the team's success. And obviously he went 4-2 last season, and then you see he went 4-2 again this season. But Bronson was very similar. Rye figured he could his handling of late series game pressure would ultimately benefit us in the long run, especially in high pressure situations like playoffs or clinching playoffs. So I definitely commend Rye for the scouting of Bronson. No one wanted him, I guess. He didn't even go for his typical min bid first pick at the beginning of the auction. Yeah, and like you said, a lot of the team was a bit skeptical because they had there was obviously some whispers that Bronson was an interesting person to have on a team in terms of I guess whether he was likable or not. I personally didn't have much of an issue. I never interacted with Bronson.
Bronson was goated.
Yeah, he was amazing on the team. He immediately jumped in, was very supportive of everyone,
and very receptive,
very helpful advice as well. I'm definitely happy that Rye suggested we pick up Bronson. He actually kind of just did it, kind of how he did some of the snakery trades in Season 5. He just inputted Bronson on the auction list because there honestly wasn't.
Decisions just got to be made.
Yeah, there wasn't anyone better. The only other person we considered was Hiker, but we reached out to Hiker and he never responded.
MIA.
He was totally MIA. I know K-Crick kind of wanted Hiker to potentially be on the team, but we were skeptical of, I guess, his activity, and I thought Bronson was the clear best player that was undrafted remaining, and I just remember his hype drinking video during the finals after he won. That was just another example of like how he embraced the rest of us was such a fun part of this atmosphere, and how the team eventually grew to just love and support him, and he ended up being one of, if not the biggest reason outside of obviously our MVP for our ability to win this season.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah, we finished our recap of I guess the two teams and our rosters and our thoughts on like the auction and the results that each player had. but we decided to now move on and kind of cover briefly cover the regular season and kind of the build up going into the playoff series that we played. So here we have kind of just the score recaps for how we did in the regular season. About half of them are pretty close. The other,
we were very much kind of just barely getting by. We had a lot of game sevens. But I would say once we hit week 3, that's when we reclaimed all of our diff and solidified ourselves as like the top team.
Yeah, that week 3 definitely. Oh, it was the reason we propelled to the first seed going into mids. I would say like it didn't really leave us for the most part, but we would always start series very poorly. We would go down like 1-2 or 0-2, and we always had to claw ourselves back into the series. There were probably a few series that, or maybe a couple series where that wasn't the case. Week 3 was one of those, and week 6 was another one on the opposite spectrum, of course. Week 3 was we didn't start slow and we continued dominating through the rest of the series like we normally do. We were a very second half oriented team of like a series. And then week 6 was like the exact opposite. Horrible start, and we did not recover, as you can see. And I would say that was probably our biggest wake-up call going into the playoffs. I think it was the reason we were able to be so successful in that semifinal series was the beatdown that we took to Noble Victory. Because after reviewing the games again, none of the games were close. Outside of like the one win was I think like a 1-0. Every game we lost was like we lost badly. Whether it be like with hacks involved or just getting out prepped. We didn't.
It allowed ourselves to recenter, refocus on the mission at hand.
Yeah, and then I would say it didn't fully translate until the second half of our series against Hungry Men in week 7. We still started off slow. I think we were down 3-1 in that series. We needed 3 wins total to just make the playoffs. But our team's goated. We won the last 3, won the series outright, and ended up finishing as the 3rd seed, which is big because we weren't the 1st seed, so we couldn't fall to the 1st seed curse.
It is real,
very very much real, as Noble Victory experienced that in round 1.
Mm-hmm. No curse means NCW. Your chances of winning are exponentially high when you're not 1st seed.
Yeah, it's basically what, like, I don't know what the odds are for 2nd seed. I don't know if a 2nd seed has ever won. Maybe it has. But most of the wins usually come from the lower seed. So we were fine with not having the advantage in playoffs, choosing the extra tier. And I would say we went after the finally like securing our playoff spot by beating Hungry Men. We were very rejuvenated because we know we could do a lot better, especially since we did 7-0 a team earlier in the season. We know that is basically what our peak is like, and no one else had basically achieved that except maybe the team we were going to play against, which was Trick of Eye. I believe they won 6-1 against the same team. Well, I mean, obviously Noble Victory won 6-1 as well in their series, but I felt like we had probably the best or the highest peak out of all the playoff teams. So I knew if we like set our mind to it, we could definitely dominate Trick of Eye, especially since we lost to them earlier in the season. I think it was week 5. Yeah, week 5.
Yeah, I always say that when it comes to rematches, I'd much rather face an opponent that I lost to initially.
Yeah,
I think that it's just way easier to just take what you did wrong and like analyze the matchup, analyze the replays, see what you did wrong, and then like improve on it. Plus, it's always on the opponent who won the first time to try and make as many changes as possible, just so that they don't end up reusing the same thing and like basically being counter teamed. And so I feel like just from it's way easier from that standpoint of being the initial loser.
yeah. And with this series in particular, at this point, I think when we played Trick of Eye, we were 4-0, and they were 3-1. I think they just came off a loss post mids, so we knew they would definitely be giving their all. So we kind of wanted to test the waters and see what lineup they would play, how they would try to approach kind of matching certain player matchups or team matchups, like our drafts. Especially given how dominant they had been in Sword and Shield, we wanted to see what they were capable of in that tier. And I would say like we put in a less than optimal lineup. We kind of changed a few things up to just kind of scout it out, and we still barely lost in 7. So I was pretty confident if we put our correct lineup, got some more favorable matchups, because I think we had pretty bad matchups in week 5 overall, that we would be able to come out with a win this time.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So I guess we could discuss some of the games from the semifinal series. Some of them were like notable, I guess, storyline driven games, maybe cool prep mixed in there. So the first game we wanted to cover was Habita versus Hunter Z Infected.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Hunter was their best player record wise. I think he was 5-1 or 6-1, something along those lines. I know he lost his was it his last game of the season or one of those? I think he lost to Glop, if I'm not mistaken. But he like lost his last game of the season, so he couldn't be undefeated. And I heard he was a bit shaken up, especially when it comes to playoff games. He gets a little bit nervous. So I figured with this matchup, he might be carrying some of that pressure with him. And Habita, having gone 2-5 in the regular season, really didn't have a whole lot of pressure on him. So we figured this could be a very good matchup to basically steal versus their quote-unquote best player record-wise.
Mm-hmm. So just looking at this matchup, this team that Habita is using is probably our best Sword and Shield team that we had. And going into playoffs, I know me and Sean had talked about beforehand with how much Habita had been struggling, that he really needed to use this team because it fit his play style so well, and that he would have the greatest chances of just succeeding by using this type of kind of, would you call this, I guess, balance, bulky offense, balance, something like that. But yeah, things like Slowbro, Lando T, Zapdos, all stuff that Habita is very used to. And just this matchup specifically, looking at the teams, things like Zapdos is just probably the MVP of this matchup. It's very hard for him to deal with. And it's also just like an incredible centerpiece for withstanding things like Wash, which, by the way, this team, I'm pretty sure we had faced maybe about 2 or 3 Washes before this, and Wash is easily the biggest threat versus our team.
I think we might have matched up with nearly every Rotom Wash with this draft.
Yeah, with this team. And there's only a few ways how this draft can handle Rotom Wash, and it was kind of funny um because we had faced Wash so much, we almost utilized like all the different Zapdos sets that could counter Wash, like Nasty Plot Wash. It was really interesting.
I think the one we
And
landed
it
on,
helped later on too.
yeah, I think the one we landed on in this series basically propelled, or I guess facilitated the use of this team against Rotom Wash, or even like, I think some other mons later on, the same type of Zapdos was kind of utilized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
But yeah,
we can just hop into the game a little bit, but I knew this mirror Haba was definitely struggling in mocks with this matchup. Their team is just so offensive, with very naturally bulky mons that don't really die in one hit. And as you can see, the Zapdos with light screen and pressure would be able to withstand this Rotom, or outlast this Rotom.
Light screen was a very good tech from our part. Just being able to not only take on Rotom, but also handle things like Moltres and Blacephalon too if they ever came in.
Yeah.
And Panda was also a very good mon in this matchup. As you can see, he has very little switching, so he brought Rough Skin, Rocky Helmet, Chomp, and we actually get a pretty fortunate crit there that allowed us to kill with Bullet Punch afterwards, which was like honestly pretty nice. And I think what Habita was kind of setting up for this game was the win con stack attacker, because when it came to Wash, that Mon can definitely be killed by a body press if set up from stack attacker, and also body press does a lot of damage to Melmetal as well, and it's able to eat hits from things like Moltres and Blacephalon. But yeah, that was honest. That play right there where the Blacephalon ended up being lured by Slowbro, that was a very huge play for him, just because we honestly had no Blacephalon switching, and one of the ways we could even withstand Blacephalon was hopefully luring it. So that was like super big for Habita. I remember like just watching that game live, and I was like, oh yeah. At that point, I knew the game was going to be wrapped up.
Yeah, we basically had to lure Blacephalon and hope he fell for it.
Mm-hmm.
Big Staka getting its damage.
As y'all can see, this is the beginning of Staka Carnage. Staka, I think, is a very underrated Pokemon that people knows what it does, but like at the same time, it's kind of hard to prep for, especially on this team where it's not even like the sixth Mon. Like Staka Attacker doesn't have to come like ever, but when it does, it like shows out. And I think this was like just an example of that, where it had pretty much very little counterplay, and it ended up pulling through.
Yeah, I think the outside of the Zapdos and then Staka, we all wanted Staka Taka to sweep. I think the biggest issue we had was just deciding on what the lander set would be. I know we had like a heated argument between like 4 people trying to basically narrow down what the lander set was going to be, and like the sequences and all that, and it just got super confusing. But thank God we settled on this set. It was the best way to get rid of Rotom with the Explosion. If Zapdos wasn't, once we revealed Light Screen, we knew Rotom would probably have to work around that. We could probably bait it with Landers, and then that would basically allow Staka Taka to clean through the team. And Panda, or even the Cobalion, would have ultimately been able to weaken the Garchomp, which did happen. And Staka just kind of ran through him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that game was pretty much a blowout. I think the prep was just very solid. Habita definitely put in a lot of work for this matchup compared to the regular season, where he definitely told us he didn't feel as motivated, or he just didn't put the time in with prep. He knew he had to do that in order to pull out big wins in the playoffs, and this is the first of many.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the next game we wanted to cover was Rise game from the semifinal. This was actually the clincher. I think this was game 5 of the series, and we had actually had this matchup against Toe, like the exact same one.
Matchup. Yeah. The previous matchup was between Bronson and Hunter, which was a game 7 matchup. And I remember all the work and time we spent on trying to get Bronson a good build versus, because honestly, this is a very terrible matchup for us. Just because things like Cart were super hard to handle for our team, and the likes of Beware, Walling, Lycanroc Dusk, and Weavile made it really challenging to like get any of our offense going, as well as the fact of trying to handle Mew, which honestly could run a different variety of sets here. And yeah, it was just, I remember going into like, you know, trying to get Bronson like a really good build for this, and like the only thing that we could settle on was pretty much like hyper offense with, I think we had like things like counter Weavile, and like it was just really bad. It was really bad to try and make any sort of progress.
It was a very gimmicky team that relied on
Yeah.
probably very specific builds, and
Yeah.
the unpredictability of Mew really just made it so we couldn't run that gimmicky of a team. But we definitely learned from it, and I think Rye ended up with a really good build versus their potential, and I think they ended up bringing like a near identical build.
Yeah, near identical team. I remember just in the prep for this matchup, I like sat down and really because I had to put in a lot of work to even get like a remotely good team for this. But I know I ended up going through, I think like maybe 8 or 9 different Savali types. It was really bad. But yeah, I ended up settling on a pretty decent team. Things like Victini is definitely the star of this matchup just because he has very little fire resist. And Weavile as well was also pretty decent if I could take down the Beware. So I ended up leading Victini, bolt striking. I actually get pretty fortunate and get the para and full para, which honestly, I must admit, this matchup would be very difficult without any sort of hack. So honestly, that was really to my benefit. So I was able to then U-turn out, and Dragonite was also another huge threat to be concerned about, just because like I had very little switches to flying or dragon spam, and so I kind of end up exchanging my Swampert just for rocks, because I know that things like Chardy Berry, Moltres exist and that the Dragonite is banded, so I figured that prioritizing rocks is my best option. And here, this is actually a matchup where Amogu is kind of viable, just because it could serve as a card check with no item. But I ended up sacking it to Mew, which was unfortunate. I didn't expect them the same meter beam that they had the first time, but yeah, they had that. It was okay because I ended up bringing a Spadef Savali Ghost, and that mom was able to 1BO on a Mew, which is what honestly was one of the largest threats. At this point, I just need to make sure that Cart isn't able to win, and the way how I do that is that if he's banded, things like Weavile outspeed, and if he's not banded and it's just Scarf, he doesn't ever kill my Victini at full. That was kind of the way how I was playing that if I ever lost him. And so with things like boots and by keeping Victini healthy, I was able to make sure that essentially Cart could never sweep me without being killed itself.
Yeah, and I think the Victini was like it was like max defense, right?
Something yeah, like it was like max speed, like max defense to handle Cart. I actually brought a pretty interesting Lycanroc set as well. It was AV. AV was meant to be the Moltres check, just because I didn't have a lot of good dark switchins on my team either without a different Savali or a Clefairy. So AD was able to kind of take on the Moltres. I didn't expect him to stay in, but he did. But it ended up working out. Also packed Endeavor on this because I knew that after an hit taken from Moltres with Dusk, he would most likely use Beware as a response. And with Endeavor, I could end up chipping down Beware severely to the point where that Weavile could end up breaking through it. And it ends up working out that Beware ends up dying. And at this point, I'm just focused on maintaining my health on Mickey so that Scarf cart doesn't end up sweeping me. And so that's kind of what it boils down to. He clicks Bandit Aquajet. I'm able to kill the Dragon Knight, and then his last one is Kartana. And I know that at this point, I just need to kill this mon with Weavile, and I actually was packing the Focus Blast tech because I knew that there would maybe be a situation where I needed to revenge Bandit Cart, and Focus Blast was able to always get that one-shot kill. So, and also do big damage to Beware too. I'm pretty sure I was like mixed special Weavile for that.
Yeah, but Kartana's Spadef is so ass, so it killed anyways.
Yeah. Ended up pulling out the W. I think at this point we 5-0'd. We won the semifinals pretty easily. And we're on our way to finals at this point.
Yeah. I remember at one point, I think we had like a fully special like nasty plot Weavile or what something along those lines. With like Blizzard, like Beware. We were trying like Focus Blast, but like he kept missing a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then eventually we just
have to rely on Focus Blast. It was not happening.
Yeah. I mean, even if you missed Focus Blast there versus Cart, it showed it was speed boosting, and Victini was Eevee to live from the banded Cart. So, but yeah, this was a good win. A bit fortunate in the beginning, but I think they said the Tentacruel went for like Toxic Spikes, I think, at the beginning of the game, or maybe knockoff. I don't remember exactly what the click was there, but yeah, we 5-0'd instantly. I think it's the fastest playoff clinching, or the playoff clincher ever in DPL.
Yeah.
And this was en route to probably, I think, the biggest playoff series win in DPL history, only dropping one game in the series, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, we wanted to show one other game, which was just to highlight some of the spicy prep through teamwork that we had. This was Amel versus Ice Demon Grey. And this was a showcase of Amel and Master J's Curse Mamoswine, which was...
Oh, whoa. I was also involved in this creation.
Oh, yes, you too as well.
Now, this is my set idea, but Aster finessed it to the point where it was unbeatable.
Yeah, it was just beautiful to watch.
This is the best set of all DPL of all time. Curse Mamoswine.
It's a
Yes, sir.
It's a set I've seen before, but not used to this extent. And look at their team. They really had no switch-ins to dual stabs Mamoswine. The only real mon that could potentially take a hit was the Manaphy. But we had so many ways to put pressure on Manaphy across the board with like Empoleon. We had ways to revenge it with like Thundurus and even Infernape.
The idea was that with them having no defog or really like any way to get rid of screens, with screens from Yuffie, we would be able to get in Mamo, and if they went Manaphy to attack us, we would get the weakness policy and be able to break through it with Earthquake afterwards. But if they went to any other mon like Pharaoh, which would typically be a pretty good answer to Mamo, that's where something like Curse and Sub came in, because we were able to sub on something like Leaf Seed and then start cursing up. And if Pharaoh didn't have, well, number one, if Pharaoh had power with Reflecting and Curse, it wouldn't be able to break Sub. And then, of course, if it had Gyro, with us being min speed and with the Curse and then all that, like, essentially Gyro would never, ever even remotely break Sub. And at that point, Mamo can kind of clean up the rest of his team with the likes of Ice Shard and Earthquake.
Yeah, I think the spread that Aster came up with was we would be behind a sub. Pharaoh wouldn't be able to break it with 2 gyros at like +1 first.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, why don't we just watch through it? To us, we already won the series, but we kind of just wanted to see the Mamoswine set work. That's all we were looking forward to when we were watching this game. So I know for the most part, he just needed to scout things out, get some chip. But like the game itself really didn't matter, because like once the Mamoswine comes in, it was basically just over. Once it was set up properly, because they had, like you said, there was no defog, no counterplay to the screens unless they ran like brick break. Yeah.
And so yeah, this was basically the beginning right here with the screens. Yeah, and then we were also packing Safeguard too. I remember that was so that we could pretty much get in something like Mamo without having to worry about toxic.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Got up our rocks. I think initially we ended up setting screens. I'm not sure it was like entirely effective, because I know we had like our Thunderous that we could use to start like breaking things. But like I said, like this battle itself felt like it didn't matter until like Mamoswine came in, because at that point it would have just been over. And I think we also ran Oblivious Mamoswine, so like guard couldn't thick fat it.
So couldn't be taunted.
Yeah, and taunt as well.
Yeah, guard also thick fatting was another big thing.
We've all getting that wish.
Yeah, at this point, I'm pretty sure Amo's just trying to get in a position where he can get in UC screen, and then get in Mamo.
I think they ran like AV Torn as well. Yeah, that was a crit with Torrent.
Also, this was I think, was this a rematch?
I don't believe so. We played we played their Gallade team.
Yeah, they had 2 kind of Manaphy oriented teams.
Yeah, Manaphy is really good in Oras. I remember one of the games, I think they brought Scarf Manaphy. I thought that was a bit of a waste, but
yeah.
Here we end up getting our Reflect, because that's all we needed at this point.
Memento to always get in Memo for free. And yeah, at this point, this is the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Man was able to curse up, and Manaphy's in range of Shard, so that's like one of the biggest threats to Memo gone. And
yeah.
At this point, he has pretty much no counterplay to Memo. Sub with Reflect and the Curse means that Pharaoh's never breaking Sub. And yeah, that's just Earthquake spam and Ice Shard spam to the end of the game.
Yeah, this is why the Reflect was good. Just, they couldn't break it with 2 Gyro Balls. Pretty demonic set. But yeah, I think another reason we had Safeguard, not just like Toxic, for example, if like Ferrothorn was carrying it, it was the Manaphy. If it clicked Scald, it couldn't burn us when it activated our weakness policy.
Yeah.
It was another big thing. I don't remember exactly what our item was, though. It might have been... Oh, wait, weakness policy. Duh. Yeah, I'm dumb.
Yeah.
Just said it.
That's about that. Amo continuing his his carnage of the Oras tier. Honestly, never ever expected for Amo to be so dominant in Oras. Just because that's usually a tier like performed by like a lot of older, more experienced players who have played Oras like for a long time. But Amo told us that he was able to do all tiers, and he did not lie. And yeah, he was able to go crazy. So yeah.
But yeah, that was probably my favorite set of the season. That Mamo Swine. Put in the work. I'm shocked Mega Chomp lived, but Mega Chomp is just that fat, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we ended up 7-1-ing Trick of Eye. Got our revenge from the regular season. All the trash talking that was done behind the scenes. But yeah, I felt very confident after that beatdown. And we ended up playing
into the next week.
Yeah, we ended up playing the Ghosty Majorities, who defeated the first seeded. Double victory. Big shocker there. But yeah. Right, why don't you tell them about the little backstory for how this series started?
Now, going into this, I already knew this was a very precarious situation. So, due to the fact that with us being the favorites to win, and as well as the fact that we had won our initial week versus them during the regular season, I knew that the Ghosting Majorities would be a very dangerous opponent. And so going into the beginning of our series, who played first? I can't remember. I just remember it was a lot of continuous losses back to back to back. I remember.
It was
third game.
I think it was Amel. Amel versus Eric.
Amel played first. Had amazing prep. However, I think he played the end game a little bit wrong, and Eric was able to pull that back. At that point, we're not stressing as a team, but then going into later games, I think it was who played next? Was it Sablo?
It might have been you. Well, actually, no, it was definitely Sab. Yeah, I think both Oras games were first.
Yeah, Sablo played next. I can't remember who he played.
Rob.
Man, it's been so long. Yeah. Oh yeah, was that the game too?
Yeah, it was their second game.
Playing Rob. Yeah, Sablo. I remember for that matchup, Sablo it was a very bad matchup for us, and Sablo honestly couldn't really get any team that really worked in all scenarios versus Rob, and ultimately, he had to go in with basically the best he could, and I know if I remember correctly, he didn't play the game super optimally, but yeah, that was a loss on our part, and so at that point we're down 0-2, and then I was game 3. And I remember from mine, that was just a combination of being out prepped, as well as the fact that I got a little bit unlucky in the game as well. And yeah, that was an L. I'm pretty sure I played Sun.
Yeah, you did play Sun.
So yeah, at this point, we're 0-3. And, of course, that's always going to be pretty nerve-wracking, just because one more game means that they solidify us going to tiebreak, and another game after that means that they win the entire thing. So there was a little bit of saving grace, though, with players like Rick and After left, probably 2 of our star players, as well as Habda, that just came off of a pretty dominating win. So I think it was Cake Rick who ended up playing.
Yeah.
And that game was just so unfortunate because Cake Rick played a little bit risky, made some unnecessary plays, but at the end of the day, he was still going to take that match, and he ended up being hacks with his Comfey.
I will say he definitely had outs in that scenario, but despite the risks he made, he was in a position to win that end game. I think his biggest, outside of the clicking synthesis versus Giga Drain at the end there with this Comfey, I think the biggest misplay was letting his Zygarde take the amount of damage it did, because that basically allowed Salazzle. Yeah, it allowed the Salazzle like to basically lock into a fire move and win that end game.
Yeah. So at that point, right, we're down 0-4, and it's looking very grim. In order to even have a chance of winning this chip, we have to win all 4 of our games left, and that's only just to get the tiebreak as well. And so with our next game, I think we had Devin.
Yeah, Devin versus Gaiman.
Yeah, and so with that, honestly, Devin had a pretty good team, but at that point, because it was looking kind of grim, I'm pretty sure he was kind of just playing just to play. But we actually got pretty fortunate because game ended up timing out, and we ended up getting the win based off of that and getting a little glimpse of hope.
And I'd also like to just add with that game, I know a lot of people say we got very lucky, and like TJM choked. I mean, you definitely do if you lose the timer, especially at that far stage of like the DPL playoffs, the finals. You shouldn't be losing to timer. Like the awareness has got to be there. But at the end of the
timer is a win con.
Yeah, at the end of the day, timer is still a part of the game. It's a skill to have timer management, and as much as we did get lucky there, I personally thought that was a legitimate win because that was a legitimate win con. So we'll definitely take it. Definitely lucky about it, but a win is a win. Just as much as like losing to hacks is still a win for the opponent, and we can't do anything about that. So
I must admit, during that Devin game, I was ready to pack it up. I thought we had lost the whole thing.
I
pretty much 5-0'd.
I had pulled it up. I didn't know if he was gonna win, and then I was like, well, the timer's kind of low, and then like I looked back and he timed out, and I was like, oh, yeah. We can take those.
It was. I'm pretty sure it was very. I think it was not looking like Devin was going to win. I think he had to make some plays. I don't know if it was impossible for him to win, but I'm pretty sure that it wasn't likely. And so
if Gaiman could come up with the correct play within the 10 seconds he was having every turn, then yeah. But it's hard to say because he did only have 10 seconds, and that's a really high stress situation. So who knows if Gaiman would have actually made the optimal play. Devin, I think, still had like over 200 seconds left in the match, so he definitely knew what he needed to do at the end game and basically get his Kartana in to try to get a speed boost. But definitely unfortunate for Gaiman. But he would try to get his redemption later on.
Yeah. Now going into our next couple of games, we had Habita versus Bird, which that match. Oh, was it Habita? No.
Yeah.
Actually, it was Aster before that. Aster played. I think it was it Pi or Undead? I can't remember who was on that team.
It was Undead. I'm not sure who was game 6 or 7 between the two of them. I know it was yeah, I can actually pull it up real quick just to verify. It was Aster versus Undead, yeah.
Yeah, Aster versus Undead. Aster, that was a matchup that Aster had played before. That same, I think he was using that Infernate team with Lando and Shark, and he was playing that same team that he had played beforehand with it was Coco, Kieran Black, Mega Scissor. It was like a very busted team. But yeah, Aster put in a lot of work for his game. even though he won the match, he made sure that he tweaked his sets and optimized them. And honestly, if I recall, that match was very dominating win from him.
Yeah, it really wasn't close. I feel like the control he had was just he really didn't feel pressured.
Yeah. And so then moving into our third game, for our second to last, I would say that matchup with Habano versus Bird, that was a player rematch, by the way. And I know we had put in a lot of work and effort to make sure that Habano was ready for that game, especially when we knew that that was like one of the only ways that we can, kind of salvage our run and try and make it to tiebreak. So, that game, Habano was able to, I'm pretty sure he also won that game pretty convincingly without.
Yeah, I think he got a bit lucky at times, but I don't think it changed the grand scheme of it all. We brought this, I think, the same like light screen Zapdos versus Rotom Wash. I think we had the matchup before when we played TGM in week 2. We just kind of optimized our sets with what we kind of learned through like similar type of matchups we've had throughout the season, and I think we were very well prepared this time. I mean, I think we were prepared last time. I just think we just didn't play with it as well. Habana definitely did, and another dominating win from him as he did in the semifinals. And that basically set it up for Game 8.
Going into the match that everybody wants to know about. The game that potentially going to get me. The game that saved our run. The guy Bronson. Now going into this match, do you have the graphic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Finals match between Bronson and Ian MC.
Yeah, now going into this match, right? This was a match that we very much put in so much effort into trying to get the most optimized team possible, because honestly the matchup was very difficult. Things like Passimian made it really hard to try and win with Hydreigon, and things like Serp as well and Zeraora, just because a Scarf set can easily revenge all of them. And the likes of Celesteela made it so that Serp could never break. And yeah, it was a pretty tough matchup. Celesteela also kind of walled Scizor, so a lot of our offense was kind of put on the backseat. And so I remember just in the prep stage, we had a lot of debate back and forth about what was the best route to take. And we ultimately settled on a pretty hyper offensive route. I feel like that's oftentimes the best way to overcome difficult matchups.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can talk about it, some of the matchups, Sean.
Yeah, I know with this, we specifically chose Yusum as our 8th tier or 8th game for this because we were the higher seed. Because of this team in particular, their Yusum, I don't remember what number it was, but one of their Yusum teams they had used only once, and they weren't very fond of it. They weren't very confident in it, so we knew we could try to pull a player into this, or a good player into this tier to try to cover that potentially. And surprisingly, the matchup was iffy, just because of like, I would say mainly because of Steela plus like Simeon and then the Mew. We weren't too threatened by Mega Gyarados. We had played one in Trickavai. Like Trickavai had a Mega Gyarados that we played with this team previously. Serp was usually was able to handle it pretty well, along with like with Hydreigon. But I think the main mon everyone cared about was the Zangoose. I don't think anyone considered bringing Camel or like Nihiligo in this matchup. We definitely knew we wanted Zangoose, and like with the hyper offensive route, under screens, we knew Zangoose would actually be able to break. I think initially we had like Swords Dance. Someone considered Bulk Up, if it even gets Bulk Up. But I know Swords Dance was like initially used in mocks, and then we were saying if in most cases people are just gonna switch hard versus Zangoose and kind of force it with like Helmet Chip or something designed to live like a +2 hit, kind of like Celesteela. We thought Celesteela could just be Rocky Helmet, bulky for Zangoose. So we ultimately came up with Belly Drum, because if it was forcing a lot of switches, why not just get the max amount of damage and potentially break through their team? We didn't necessarily think it was going to sweep, but we thought it could get at least 2 kills, if not a kill, and then severely weaken something else with priority. We figured that'd be beneficial to Zeraora in the long game, and even the Scizor as well.
Yeah, the main thing that Zangoose had to do was eliminate that Celesteela, because that was his only normal resist, and that would allow for something like Scizor to clean late game.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we can just dive into the match.
Yeah.
I think just going into this, there was no one that I would have rather be playing this game 8 than Bronson, just because I know he's so comfortable with these types of games, and doesn't worry about the pressure or like something like, you know, just all the spectators that were watching. Like he doesn't care about any of it. He knew what he had to do, was able to not care about the nerves and execute the game plan. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there was over maybe like 120 people watching this game live. It was absolutely insane.
Yeah, I was super nervous though, just because, of course, this is what our series came down to. Like, if we didn't win this, it was over for us.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Big Zera there getting a crit.
Yeah, the strat was honestly working very well. Zera, we knew would be a huge threat for him to deal with, especially behind screens, and a bulk up with Z Giga Impact being able to just destroy Seismitoad, in the case that he was like Rindo and Spadef, like meant for Grass Knot. So yeah, and then things like SERP screens. I feel like we ended up running screens on a lot of our teams this season. Honestly, just because a lot of people did not have good defoggers.
Yeah.
It ended up being super good. And they actually brought the screens themselves, which is pretty interesting. I feel like that made it so that it halted our game plan a little bit, because we also had to play around their screens. But yeah.
Yeah, defensive Hydreigon just completely taking that U-turn like a champ.
Mm-hmm. And chipping out with Rocky Helmet.
Yeah.
That was very good, because Silk Scarf Zangoose is able to kill the likes of Passimian with +6 quick attack, with a little bit of chip, as well as do a lot of damage to Gyarados as well. And so this is where we're in a very good spot, because we're able to get off the belly drum, and at that point he's pretty much forced to either sack Celesteela or give us ship on another Mon, and he ultimately tries to intimidate with Gyarados, but at that point it didn't really matter. He
was mainly trying to bait like the quick attack for Rocky Helmet chip, but I actually thought Bronson was going to click low kick versus Gyarados. I figured that's what he was going to do, just hard switch back to Steela, and I think we probably could have won had he done that.
Had he predicted,
yeah. But this
Zangoose did his job.
Yeah, it got a kill and it weakened Gyarados to put in range of Mega Scizor.
Mm-hmm. And so now Mega Scizor is a really good threat versus him.
Yeah. I will say Bronson, while the Jolteon was pretty annoying with like screens, toxic, Volt Switch, I would say he played very well around their screens, especially with that Zangoose. Getting in Zangoose to belly drum on the last turn to reflect like perfectly, so there was no reflect up versus the Celesteela.
Mm-hmm. No, he had good management. At this point, the main thing I was concerned about was making sure we didn't lose to Mew, because that was the one mon in his team that we didn't really know what set it could be, and that was the only mon that could really win this game for him. And so I think that was like, I was just like, please do not lose to the late game Mew, especially behind screens. And so
yeah, we were
make sure our offense won first.
Yeah, in mocks we were definitely he was definitely struggling against certain, like, I think plot Z Mews. That was like the only way that they were able to, I felt, to win the matchup. So we knew we kind of had to preserve the Scizor, because if Scizor was especially behind screens and Mew wasn't boosted, we were pretty confident we could live. I think we definitely able to live any fire hit from the Mew at that point. So we knew we just kind of had to keep it healthy. Oh, that was funny that Jolteon was quick feet. Not entirely sure. Oh, I think it had to do with like screens.
For the screens,
Yeah.
Gen 7 moment.
I wonder if Bronson knew that. We can just say he knew it.
We can say he knew it, but I'm gonna go ahead on the record and say that he did not know that. but for everybody else, he did know that. He did. He knew.
Bronson's the GOAT.
But yeah, at this point,
I was actually shocked that he let the Mew take damage like this.
Yeah, we're like, when we got that huge damage on Mew, I knew that it would be in range of Scizor being able to bullet punch it afterwards, and that was basically the biggest concern gone. And yeah, at that point, the game was wrapped, and we were able to take the game 8 and move into tiebreak.
Yeah, I think the game came down to timer, as why the hell not? But yeah, this game was
Short comeback.
Yeah, this game was very well executed by Bronson. Handled the pressure like immaculately. Like Bryce said, I don't think I would have wanted any other person in this position.
Mm-hmm.
Mids pick up, basically being undefeated in the playoffs. That's a big W.
Yeah.
In my book. Hopefully he will go drafted next season and not have to wait till mids. But yeah, that secured us going to tie breaks. We did a reverse sweep to force the tie break. And yeah, going into determining the lineup for that, I would say it was pretty easy to guess like what teams and what individuals were gonna play.
Well, I would say definitely for the teams, I feel like our teams were honestly really clear on what we needed, what were the best teams that would handle all situations like on our side. And I think we did really well at choosing. Not only did we choose the best teams possible, but we made sure the teams had the best pilots of those teams.
Yeah. I know for them, we knew Rob was a guarantee for their ORS slot. So since we had one of every tier for the tiebreak. And I was kind of shocked they didn't put Cookie in for Sun and Moon. Obviously they had their reasons on their team, and obviously some drama that stemmed from it. Well, we won't get into that, but Eric ended up playing in Sun and Moon. I actually thought Eric was gonna be their Sword and Shield player, but they ended up putting Gaiman, who just lost the timer. I was actually kind of shocked about that, even though he's given a chance to redeem himself. I thought the timer loss kind of showed that pressure basically got to him, and he was basically thrown into an even higher stakes game in the tiebreak.
It made sense just because Gaiman was their best Sword and Shield player.
Yeah, record-wise.
Yeah, so... But anyways, enough about them. Now going into us. What we decided was, number one, we had to play our GOAT of the season, the MVP, Aster, in Ultra Sun and Moon, his home tier, and also with his best team, the Shark team. That was clear. Aster had won numerous times with that Shark team and had specifically won twice versus the Ghosting Majorities with that Shark team. So that was a clear choice from us. Then into the other tiers. When it came to our ORAS slot, we ultimately decided on Sablo just because Sablo had been very dominant in the tier, consistent, and knowing that he would end up facing potentially Rob, we felt that no one knew that player matchup better than Sablo after having faced him twice beforehand. So that was that slot. And then going into our Sword and Shield slot, here we ended up choosing Habda. Now, after two pretty dominant wins in playoffs, Habda had all the momentum behind him, even though he had a pretty rough regular season. And so I was super confident that he could end up excelling in tiebreak. And he had honestly earned his place by just showing a lot of improvement and a lot of dedication in playoffs. So, yeah, that was, I think, a pretty
clear choice.
Pretty clear choice, yeah. Oh, yeah, and the team he ended up using was the Lando team that we had kind of assigned to him and that he had gotten wins with and had knew the ins and outs of very well. So,
yeah. We knew, like, kind of what teams were best, like, against majority of their drafts or what they might end up choosing. And it happened to be that all the momentum players had their drafts basically assigned to them for these tiebreaks. So it was kind of just a clear choice. We had some like debate over who we might put in Sword and Shield over Habada, but I think at that point he'd basically shown he was probably the most dominant player in the playoffs out of all the teams so far. So it'd be kind of a mistake not to go with that momentum. And then I think Sablo was like had used all of the teams in rotation in ORAS that season, and I think this was actually like a team he like rarely used going into that Rob matchup. But yeah, these were big games. We were grinding our asses off. I think Ryan and I were still together in like an IRL meetup during this week, so we were able to actually prep.
We were prepping in person.
Yeah, prepping in person. So that made this experience pretty fun, especially since neither of us were playing. All we had to do was just create mocks and like offer support throughout the day. I think I ended up making like 8 different versions.
On his phone.
Yeah, I think I made 8 different versions of Eric's team for Aster to mock him with. It's like pretty.
Yeah, Aster's match was definitely the most difficult one. He was like, he went through like 100 different versions. It was so bad. Yeah, that was one that took a lot. But anyways, let's start diving into these.
All right. So the first one we're gonna go is the first game that was played, which was Habada versus Gaiman, and I think this was the matchup I was the most confident in. It was pretty clear like what their team could do, and like how like kind of like our approach for it was pretty clear. We made some minor tweaks as we did mocks and stuff, and like kind of what we had to look out for. But I think a lot of it hinged upon keeping things healthy, out of range of Belly Drum, Aquajet, Azu, and then kind of scouting out what their Mew was going to be. Because an offensive Mew was very, very threatening, I felt. It just really depended on like what their set was, what the coverage was. But ultimately, they brought something very different.
And just from our perspective, if it wasn't clear enough, just looking at their team, their only still resist is Kaparaja. So at moment's glance, when I saw this matchup, I already knew what would be the set at hand. We had to bring the Choice Banded Staka. This Mon with Choice Band, Gyro Ball, had pretty much no switching on his team, especially because a lot of his defensive-oriented Mons, things like Mew, things like Zapdos, which they had constantly ran defensive Rocky Helmet with, and it also honestly was the best set for them here. And even the likes of Claydol all have very high speed stats. So essentially, Gyro Ball.
It was always like two-shotting him. Yeah.
Yeah, it two-shot or one-shot pretty much his entire team. And Kaparaja was a very bad Mon in this matchup between the likes of Lando, Zapdos, Slowbro, Cobalion. So yeah, that just made it even easier for Staka to spam. But yeah.
We can just go right into the match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a good matchup though for us because I was honestly surprised that they brought this Sword and Shield team. I felt like this Sword and Shield team from them had a lot of flaws and was honestly kind of one-dimensional. Just because Mons like Zera, Azu, Zapdos, Hydreigon, they only really have that like a couple different sets, maybe about 2 or 3 when you really think about it.
I figured they could bring this team purely because of the Mew. I think consistently across the season, when we played very fat offensive psychic types, yeah, like Mew, Necrozma, Galar, Slowking, a lot of our teams struggled versus those fatter psychics when they were offensive. When they brought this Mew, I was honestly reassured. I didn't think this was as
potent versus us.
Yeah, I didn't think it was as threatening. Mainly because like it was just one less offensive threat to worry about, and honestly, I didn't quite understand why he went Staka here without.
It was unfortunate that we got the static para.
Yeah.
Because it ended up weakening the gyro damage. But as you can see, Staka is still so good.
that was burned.
The Claydol being burned. That's insane that Staka is able to do that much.
Yeah, but I would say the early game, Haba definitely was doing a lot of scouting, and I don't think he played around the Mew as optimally. Like, we lost Boots on Zapdos. Staka got burned, which definitely hurt in the end game there. So we kind of basically had to make sure Zapdos was healthy enough for Azu, the end game.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sequence here between Zera and Lando, like this, I didn't like in this. I don't know why he didn't make any plays around it, but it almost felt like he couldn't, and so he kind of just stuck with it and just let everything like take damage.
Yeah, this was, if I remember correctly, this was honestly the most straightforward matchup after the first couple turns. Literally, it just consisted of Habita getting up rocks, and then from then on, just continuously spamming U-turn. It was really just a done deal, like, and very simple as well. And it was crazy too because our Zapdos had lost Boots, and a lot of our offensive mons were burned. But even still, it was just their team lacked recovery, and so it was just very easy to just keep pivoting around with hazards.
Their team also lacked a lot of power because like this era was basically invalidated by Lando. Their Zapdos was defensive. Like Claydol wasn't gonna do a whole lot. It mainly relied on like Azu and like whatever the Hydreigon was.
Yeah, but they ended up Hydreigon was a threat, but they ended up bringing a defensive Hydra as well. I'm sure it was meant for the Spectre. That's the great thing about Spectre is that even when it doesn't come, it forces a lot of prep from the dark types.
Yeah.
And so Hydra was essentially, I think, like some Snarl Spadef set to try and handle Spectre, and that mon didn't even come, and it basically eliminated one of his biggest offensive threats versus us, especially when we didn't have Clefairy on our team. So yeah, that essentially his whole team was defensive oriented, and it made it so that our it was easy to whittle down his team with hazards and our offense as well with the likes of Cobalion and Zapdos and all that.
Yeah, that's why I was so shocked at the Mew that they brought. Because Haba is known for bringing pretty straightforward, like, defensive pivots between like Landorus, Zapdos, and like Slowbro. I would have thought maybe they would have used the Mew that would take advantage, be able to break, especially for Azu. But like they really didn't have like a lot of ways to pressure our team. Like Landorus was just able to like rest versus like Zera. Zera would just take rocks damage every time it came in. And then like Zapdos, even with boots gone, was still just staying around the whole game.
Mm-hmm. And his Hydra had no way to touch Bangirl either.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we did see like a very similar like Snarl U-turn set in like Mox. When we played a Hydreigon team with the Spectre team like week 1, I think. And like it just didn't do anything. Like even though it's designed for Spectre, like Spectre sets
the rest of the team.
Yeah,
especially when we have double fighting. One that quad resists dark and the other that has justified. It was just very bad.
Yeah, this matchup was just weird. I thought the prep wasn't like ideal from them. The play obviously couldn't really do much versus our build. And then I thought they fumbled the bag with Mew. I really do. I think the only reason you bring this team into tiebreaks was because Mew was like a bulky psychic was so threatening versus most of our builds, and then they end up bringing some standard or ass looking Mew with spikes.
But yeah, Cobalt was able to set up and just start doing a lot of work. I think he ends up swapping though. Maintaining Cobalt.
I know Cobalion was definitely struggling versus like defensive Zapdos and Mox. Initially I think we had pads, but hazards were becoming an issue. So I think we ultimately decided to just run boots because the damage difference between like all of the hazards plus like Rocky Helmet wasn't like, it was actually worse being pads. So we ultimately changed it. Especially since we had Pangoro to potentially knock off Zapdos's pads if it was like used for like both of our fighting types. And that was the beauty of like having double fighting. Like a lot of the checks were like they had to check one of our fightings, but then they would lose to the other.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this matchup pretty much wrapped up. You can probably speed it up at this point. kind of clear cut on what was going to happen. But yeah, Habano was able to win this match pretty easily.
I think that was actually like banded Azu as well, just based off the damage. Yeah. So they didn't even bring like belly drum, which we were like super scared of.
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, at this point, you know, we're now 1-0 in tiebreak. We're feeling super confident, especially with Aster and Sablo left, and yeah, we're so close at winning this championship after the
0-4 start
that we had. Yeah, the 0-4 start that we had, we were able to bring it back, and now we're on the cusp of taking it back and winning. So yeah,
we'll move on to the second game. That was our this is our ORAS game between Sablo and Rob Jr. This was their third installment, currently 1-1 against each other. And I think actually both previous games were 1-0, so we figured this was probably going to be another close matchup potentially. We knew Rob was going to use this team as well.
Yeah, we knew going in that Rob was going to be using this team, and after it had beat down that guard team that Sablo had used beforehand during finals, we knew that the clearest option of trying to win this matchup was bringing this Clef team with Mega Arrow and Shark. As you can see, Shark is just very good in this matchup. He has virtually no dark resist, and it's pretty easy to clean as well. And also things like Arrow. Arrow is also pretty strong. He has almost no rock resist as well. And then the likes of Clefable as well. He only has 2 fairy resist, but they're both weak to fire, so that opened up the legs of offensive Clef. I think we ended up running like Life Orb and like Fire Blast. But yeah, this was like honestly a pretty good matchup offensively for us. Even Azelf had pretty much no switch-ins. It was kind of just about like maintaining like mons for Manaphy, as well as the like Starmie was kind of annoying for us, just because it was able to keep off hazards for them. But yeah,
I mean, even the Mega Manetric was scary because our only real like pivot to that mon, or even Volt Switch in general, was Donphan, and we were seeing that it was pretty easy to wear down over time, especially if they toxiced it. So yeah, I think this matchup was pretty straightforward. We had a lot of good offensive mons here. I think the Azelf was the most creative thing that we had.
Yeah,
I think it was a Assault Vest, right?
Yeah, you can start playing the matchup, by the way.
Okay.
Kind of talk through this. But yeah, when it came to Azelf, I was honestly, when we were creating sets for Sablo and like going through it, I was honestly inspired for my own game where AB Rock Dust was able to be an offensive threat, but also check some of the mons from his team. And that's where the idea of AB Azelf came in, because a lot of his team is specially based with things like Manetric, Starmie, Manaphy, Rose. And so AB Azelf not only could do tons of damage because he had very limited switches, but also be used as a soft check to the likes of Manaphy, which is honestly really important in a match like this where it's a pretty offensive matchup and mons are going to be trading back and forth. So yeah, that was kind of the idea behind that.
And I do remember our Arrow being like a very specific set. A lot of people didn't like it. I think it was pretty effective for what it was supposed to do. But obviously, issues came with it at the end of the game. But we'll see that when it happens. I'm just gonna go normal speed here.
Yeah. The idea was that we wanted to try and pursuit trap Starmie and like kind of weaken it down, while also like kind of maintaining Rox, because Rox is so good versus them. But this Clef was one of our big win cons in this game. Cosmic Power meant that it was super hard for him to break through with any of his mons being Scizor or Roserade, and Life Orb Clef would be able to supplement the damage and rip through his team while also being unkillable. So that was one of the main mons that we had to try and win this game. And then we also had Shark as the other late game win con that would be able to clean after this. We actually got pretty fortunate not being crit here from the Rose. Sablo is definitely risking it, but it's understandable just with how good Clef was this game, and wanting to essentially try and keep Clef as healthy as possible, so that he could break through the rest of his team. But yeah.
Yeah, and weakening Roserade was really good for Sharpedo as well, so we were fine with, weakening that in that exchange. And then the Manaphy was taking so much damage here. made that read about us healing. He went for tail glow, but it really didn't matter. The Clef was very healthy at this point. I figured when he brought in Scizor, he was probably gonna have to U-turn around to get it in range. I think that was the best scenario there, just sacking Clef. Clef kind of did its job. It weakened, it got rid of basically 2 of Sharpedo's like biggest checks.
Yeah. So yeah, at this point, the thing that we're trying to set up is just getting in Sharpedo for free, but also not losing to Banded Scizor. Banded Scizor is definitely the best win con that he has in this game. The likes of Banded Quick Attack is super scary. But we did EV for the fact that of Banded Scizor trying to revenge something like Shark in the late game. So I'm pretty sure we ended up putting like a ton of defensive investment into the Shark so that it could live comfortably with a forward chip. And
I think it was like almost max defense on Sharpedo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to talk about this play. I think we had a lot of debate about wait, maybe it wasn't this one. I think it was about like whether we killed Landorus or not, or if we went for like rocks. It might have been here. Oh yeah, it was here. Clicking.
It was here.
Yeah.
Where we clicked on instead of going for rocks.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of, I think, a major misplay in this game. We definitely wanted to get up rocks so that we could chip main down into can you pause it right here? So that we could chip main into Shark range because main needed a little bit of chip, and for some reason Sablo clicked taunt. I'm not sure what the taunt was meant for. But at that point, I think that clicking rocks with arrow was fine, just because you would be dying anyways, and it wouldn't really matter. Like I felt like rocks was definitely just the clear play, but
yeah, I mean he could have also pursued it to get like damage on Starmie, but like I felt rocks was necessary for both Scizor and Manectric for like Sharpedo, at least in that end game. I think he said he clicked taunt because he was afraid of Starmie like clicking recover off like pursuit or whatever. I wasn't entirely sure on why, but that was the play he went for, and it definitely bit us in the butt here. Yeah. I forget what.
I remember it was crucial.
Right here.
Play. Yeah. And
this
was the other one where we went for trick. Now in this matchup, right, at this point in the game, there is no volt switching, and what volt switch allows us to do is get not only chip on main to weaken it into Shark range, but also making sure that we don't let main come in for free. And so that we can go into likes of Azo, who's AV and can eat a hit, or we can go out into Donphan. And this trick play right here cost us pretty much all the momentum that we had, and ended up being the thing that lost us the game. I think Sablo was worrying a lot about Starmie and the fact of it like just being able to kind of recover stall without realizing that at the end of the day, with Cobra gone from it, Shark can break through it, and that Shark was the only way how we could kind of win this game. And so yeah, he ended up trying to, I guess, trick the Scarf to Starmie to stop it from being able to ever recover again, but he ended up just letting him main for free, and that was kind of the end of the game.
Yeah, he was too worried about if I click trick versus Starmie, if Starmie stays in, I win the game. But he didn't factor in that the Starmie could just switch out. Volt switch was always the best play there, because if Starmie stayed in and like recovered, you at least were, yeah, we had a whole AV Alza in the back as well.
That was free to quick attack.
And then if we went into Manectric, we got free Volt switch damage on Manectric, which was that was gonna definitely help our Sharpedo in the end game there, or even a Zelf, being able to revenge it. But yeah, we were forced to basically switch, and that just gave him a pretty toxic.
Yeah, and at this point, we don't have the chip without that rocks chip from Arrow on that taunt play, and then also without that ball switch momentum, getting that chip and forcing out main. At this point, we don't have the chip necessary for Shark to really kill main. And I think this was the play too with that protect where he really needed to be aggressive.
Yeah.
Had Shark attacked into main instead of protected, Sablo could have pulled back the game, but he ended up clicking protect to be safe. And I think when you're on the back foot so much in a game, you honestly have to make those risky plays to try and like squeeze out the win. And I think that was a moment where he could have made that play, but he decided against it, and that basically took away all his hopes of ever coming back. Yeah.
I think he just attacked it. But yeah, if he did attack the Starmie, I think he was afraid of like Thunderbolt, and he needed the HP for quick attack Bandit Scizor. But at this point, he already basically foregone the chip with rocks, and then the trick play. I felt like he definitely entered a state of panic, and he decided to just play it safe rather than playing aggressive. Because I think at that point he already knew he'd basically put himself in a losing position. He kind of had to play aggressive there if he wanted any shot at winning. Because I don't think any combo of plays at the end were gonna work if he didn't get the damage on Manectric.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was an unfortunate game. I felt like we were in a very commanding position, and we kind of just threw it away in the span of like 3 turns. Definitely unfortunate. Doesn't take away from the fact that Sablo played very well all season. He was one of our most consistent players. He just definitely felt the pressure during the finals and then the finals tiebreak. It's a bit unfortunate, but he did put his best effort forward. But this left us with 1 game left on both sides, and winner would be the DPL champion. And we had to put our faith in basically our team's MVP, the most wins on our team, and probably our biggest prep helper outside of Ryan myself. That was Aster J.
Mm-hmm. Now, going into this match took a lot of effort on Aster's part. I remember he was very frustrated with the building process because it seemed like any sort of team combo or archetype that he had just lost to one of his mons on paper. The likes of the dual hazard removal core of Starmie and Donphan made it incredibly difficult for Aster to maintain something like spikes or rocks, and those were so crucially needed to chip down Kurum, Zapdos, and Salazzle and all that. So especially with an offensive team that Aster was using, having that hazard chip was super important, and the fact that essentially his hazard setters lost a hit to Eric's hazard removers was already going to make this matchup incredibly difficult on Aster's part. And yeah,
I don't know how many versions of for this matchup that Aster had. Probably 20, if not more.
So many different versions. I'm pretty sure every single mon on Aster's team was on that build
at some point.
The likes of Lapras. I think there was a Yachi, Spadef, Vileplume. There was a DD Lapras. There was what else? It was like a DD weakness policy Lapras. There was like a lot of different sets.
I think we tried like setup keys.
Setup keys. Landers was a lot of different sets. I think it was like Explosion Rocks, and then it became like a WinCon set.
My favorite was
was it Necro, like some Calm Mind Power Gem set with like
like Rest, yeah. It was the stall like Spiritomb.
Yeah, it was like Keyberry, Rest Talk, Power Gem meant to like basically break through his team with the thought of Steelix not really being a viable mod in this game, and Donphin being chipped down. There was a lot of different sets that came up during the prep time, just because of how much Aster was struggling to find a way to win this game.
Shit, I think we had Prismatic Laser Necrozma at one point.
Yeah, Prismatic Laser. I think one thing that, because I think Aster was very much focusing on how he could maintain hazards, but I think we ultimately had to realize that it just wasn't really that possible to do versus his team with Starmie essentially beating a lot of our team. And so I think one thing that we pretty much had to come together as a team and kind of help Aster realize that there had to be some other route that he could take. And ultimately I think we ended up settling on like basically like a screens setup type team that could basically slam him with different offensive threats like repeatedly, and that was kind of the best way how we could kind of take this game.
Yeah, I would say it was the main difficulty when prepping for this match was kind of I wouldn't say hindsight, but maybe a sense of over prep. Aster would consistently think of like the worst case scenarios for like why a set wouldn't be effective. Yeah, and like it was really hard to kind of like break through as a team, figuring out like what was actually effective, because like, oh, we can bring this, but then a different version of their build could end up countering it, and then that happened for every mon, like whether it be like Sharpedo, Landorus, Thundurus specifically, Necrozma, even certain like variants of like offensive Infernape. There was just as much as we memed on this draft during the draft, I would say it was a very like
the best counter to this draft right here.
It was a very coherent draft that they had, and it was definitely. I personally don't even think there was an optimal build that Aster could have brought.
I think other than Bronson's match versus Hunter, I think this was definitely the worst matchup and most difficult prep time that we had all season.
Yeah, I mean,
which was unfortunate because it was the tie break.
And on paper too, we specifically chose the Shark team because we didn't want to have our Comfey team play this team again, because we knew they would bring it. It was their best performing team by far in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, and we thought on paper like, oh, we would be able to find a way to match up well, and then lo and behold, I honestly wish we went for the third time around with the other team. I think it would have been far easier piloting that. But yeah, I would say he went through a lot of interesting sets. I wasn't too fond of like the Landorus sets, even though like it was working for some variants of builds. I'm kind of glad we settled on like an offensive one. It was like the only Landorus set like he had not basically like tried to use, or like if very little.
Even though it was the Edgequake Lando like Dual Dance was definitely the most obvious set to be ran here because of how good Edgequake was versus team, but I think Aster was trying to utilize Lando to do different things like set rocks and all that, and I think we finally came to the determination that there was no winning this game without Lando being offensive. Like it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah,
and that was a big thing.
Yeah, I wasn't too. I think my unease mainly came from like sequences with like rocks with Necrozma, because ultimately we had to like middle ground with Aster. I think he still wanted rocks. And obviously, if they let us keep rocks up, that's amazing. we'll take that exchange. But I think the Necrozma definitely suffered in this matchup because of it, and especially because of that Spiritomb. It was, yeah, I felt like we were almost playing with like 4 Mons in this matchup.
Yeah. But anyways, let's get this started.
Yeah.
Final match of the season. Yeah, this had a lot of nerves going around it. I was like super nervous watching this game. Of course, I had faith in Aster to pull it out just because he had consistently been winning, and I know how much he had been grinding for this match. But after how much difficulty we had in the prep stage, I knew it wouldn't be easy for him. Yeah.
They actually brought like the same Starmie they did versus K-Crick the round before versus Necrozma. I think they brought like a Colbur Starmie with like Toxic Recover spam, which is why we ultimately had Metronome, Dark Pulse, Necrozma in that matchup. But this time around we had Signal Beam. I think it was to work around the Colbur, but we weren't Metronome, obviously, so that set wasn't really going to break through the Starmie.
Mm-hmm. And this was kind of the Starmie set that Aster was fearing the most, was a bulky gold toxic spin set, just because it could always 1v1 both of well, essentially all of Aster's rockers here, being the likes of Lando, Necro, and Fernape. And so at this point it was becoming clear that we wouldn't ever be able to keep hazards up in this game. And that was already going to be really difficult for Aster, just because the likes of Kiram and Zapdos and all that could just come in for free without being chipped down. And that chip was necessary for someone like Shark to end up doing work. So yeah, that was already...
I didn't watch... Oh yeah, you can finish.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I didn't watch this game live because I was at work. Yay for Monday games, am I right? But I did watch the replay, and I was actually a bit unsure why he went for rocks again versus Starmie. I felt like spam wasn't optimal for Starmie there. It would have taken too much damage. I guess if he attacked, it would have been the same thing, but he went for recover there just to be at like the highest HP he could be at. I thought he was going to spam Signal Beam, because looking at the toxic damage, the Necrozma was going to end up at a low HP that Rapid Spin could actually kill. And this Starmie actually would have been, a lot weaker. I'm not sure it like played a big part, but I wonder if he could have played around it a little bit differently when I saw that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, at this point it's looking pretty grim, especially the fact that we weren't able to keep up rocks, and that our Clef Key was already so weakened because of the burn. And here they actually had a really good tech with the likes of Endure Custap. Aster was actually able to scout, but they actually were packing Endeavor. And at this point, when Klefki died to the Endeavor, I know he was definitely predicting for them to go for a rock move to kill Thunder. Oh, can you pause this?
Yeah, I'll go back.
I know he's predicting a rock move, and so I'm definitely not mad at that play. But when Klefki died to the combo of Endeavor and rocks and burn, and without getting up any sort of screens for our offense late in the game, I pretty much knew that I was very confident that this game was going to be over at this point, because Aster had essentially lost all his tools to make his offensive mons remotely threatening, with no screens, no hazards. And so it was, and also we were down 2 mons already in the beginning of this game, without things like Diancie or Kiram or Zapdos even hitting the field. So it was very grim.
He had only used Donphan and Starmie the entire game, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, to basically destroy our team so far. So yeah, it was looking very grim.
And it's those 2 spinners again, the 2 things we were worried about. But yeah, I like their Endure set. I think that was pretty cool. to run. I think they were trying to see if we were like choice locked, so the Endure was there just to basically scout what we locked ourselves into, but we revealed to be a more defensive Infernape set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at this point.
So, yeah, it was looking pretty rough. Aster, I knew it would be very hard to win this game. Aster, it was actually looking a little decent at here when he was able to kill Diancie for free, but we knew that Salazzle was such a big threat offensively. I think the flamethrower was a roll to kill, actually.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah, and so that was unfortunate. But yeah, because we weren't able to get up the rocks, something like Karen Black could basically always be an answer to Shark and stop it from cleaning, which was really important. So, yeah.
And at this point, they knew Salazzle was probably safe. We hadn't shown Electric Stab, so they probably knew we didn't have T-Wave. Salazzle was probably the most annoying Revenger on their build.
I think at this point, Aster also kind of knew that the game was not looking in his favor to win. So he was kind of just doing the best he could in terms of like maybe pulling out something. But they were max defense, Karen Black. But I think this was a crucial turn right here because honestly, this misplay from Eric allowed Aster to do a lot because here he should have clicked Fusion Bolt and killed the Shark, but what this was able to do with him for some reason clicking Home Claws, what this allowed to happen was for Shark to end up weakening and keeping Karam at around half, which is very crucial for us because as you'll see later, the Lando is able to set up while also having it in range of a move, whereas if he would have killed with the Fusion Bolt, he would have been a lot healthier, and Lando, even with setting up a Rock Polish, wouldn't have been able to kill Kiram later on. So,
yeah. And I also like to just add, I know Aster clicked Protect versus Salazzle. I think the Thunderous was a roll, depending on like what the Salazzle was. If it wasn't Specs, I don't entirely remember the EVs that he had on it. But I don't think he knew what the Salazzle's item was, so I think he had to scout with Sharpedo clicking Protect, but if he figured Salazzle might switch, I feel like crunching there would have been also a fine play, because depending on what came in, like Zapdos or Kyurem, he got this damage here, and he would have been in the same position having to chip the Kyurem down, rather than him, like, he just clicked Hone Claws. It was like the same effect here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, that was very big. The fact that Shark was able to keep the defensive Kyurem low. And so here was honestly the biggest shock of all was the fact that this Kyurem, its only way to hit Lando and its only ice coverage was a Z Freeze Shock. Now here, you can unpause. Here Aster makes an amazing play. By going and scouting for the Z Freeze Shock by stacking Infernape. I think that Aster knew that his only way to win this game at this point was the fact that this Kyurem was the set that it was. He knew that the only way to pull this out, this only chance, was hoping that this Kyurem had Z Freeze Shock, which honestly was pretty telegraphed with the fact that it was Home Claws.
Yeah.
Fusion Bolt so far, it was pretty telegraphed that it was a Freeze Shock set. And so the fact that he was able to catch that Z move with Infernape basically gave him all the chances in the world. Because now this Kyurem, having no way to hit Lando, allowed him to get up a free Rock Polish with Lando. And this Lando was bulky enough and the Starmie was defensive to the point where it couldn't even kill with Scald. And now Lando is at +2/+2. And at this moment, I was just praying because I knew that Aster could pull this out had he not gotten burned, and he didn't get burned. And it honestly came down to this one last turn right here versus Zapdos, because if Zapdos was Charty Berry, it would still, I'm pretty sure, die to the Z Rock move. However, if he was to scout the Z Stone Edge and then go back out into Charty Zapdos, he would end up being able to live the hit and kill Landorus. And so this was the play where I was like, Aster essentially has to get this 50-50 right in order to win this game. And so yeah, I was super nervous just watching this live, because it was like we had the chance to win this game, but it was honestly going to come down to what his set was and what plays Eric made. But yeah,
he ends up staying in.
He ends up staying in, but he actually wasn't Charty Berry, surprisingly enough. And it was at this point I knew that we had won this game, because we didn't have to worry about missing edge versus something like Zapdos, even if we hadn't burned the Z. And yeah, Lando was able to be strong enough to kill the defensive Starmie and kill Salazzle. And yeah, Aster is able to pull out the win just barely with like a 12% Lando.
Yeah.
All due to the fact that Current Black could not hit the Lando with anything but Freeze Shock. That was a miracle, honestly.
It basically kind of epitomized how our season was. We would always start series very poor, and then we would basically kind of sweep in the tail end of a series. That's kind of how this game was. We were getting our ass kicked for most of the game, and then we just clean swept through them at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Honestly, and I wouldn't even put that on Eric, like having bad prep. Honestly, I credit Aster's immaculate play of sacking and burning and scouting.
Yeah.
Because had he not done that, of course the game would have been lost. And this is also, this Lando set too was also like the byproduct of us all coming together, working as a team, and finally putting this set on the builder after it had been missing for so long, and then ultimately ended up winning us the game. So yeah,
it's funny too, because it's probably the most basic like Landers Yusum set.
Lando set of all time. But it had basically never reached the builder and was thought to be unviable in this matchup, but it actually was a saving grace. So yeah,
I think it was just he was mainly concerned with the sheer amount of bulk on like Zapdos with like Charty, which most of us had. Like Kyurem could be designed to live hits, as well as like Ice Shard Donphan.
Yeah, Ice Shard Donphan too.
Yeah, I was actually pretty shocked this was the outcome of the game, because like I missed it live, so I just see everyone popping off in our team server. I'm like, oh, we won. So I like quickly had to watch the replay, and then I'm just like, there's no shot, like they're trolling me, there's no shot we won this. And then
bro, I was watching this match. I was just leaving my hotel room, and I was literally in the hallway about to get onto the elevator, and people were walking onto the elevator, bro. When I tell you, I was about to walk into the elevator. Aster won the game. I literally left off the elevator and started running through the hallway, bro. Because I was so I could not believe that he had pulled out that win. I was in shock.
Yeah.
So yeah, at that point, yeah, we are now DPL champions. Aster pulled through. The whole team came through, clutched it up after being down 0-4, brought it all the way back. This is easily the most entertaining finals of DPL of all time. The fact that we were down 0-4, brought it back to a Game 8 Bronson, and then had a back and forth tie break, all to the last game of the season, the last possible game of the season, coming down to one Mon sweeping the team at the very end. Yeah, fire.
Very surreal too.
DPL season, easily.
Especially how season 5 went. Like we missed it by one game, and instead now in season 6 we won it by the last game of the season.
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, that concludes our recap of our championship winning season 6. I'd like to say thank you to all the people who I drafted, all the amazing people who put in their time, their effort, into making sure they had their builds on point, put their hearts out on the field in their matches. Also, thank you to all the people that we had helping us prep, even who weren't on the team that were providing mocks, providing build support. Love y'all. Thank you. Especially at the end too. Everybody poured in to support the team once we reached the finals, and they were crucial to our success. So yeah.
Yeah, I just echo the same thing Rye said. I love all the people that we drafted across both seasons, and especially obviously with Wings having won it all. We were definitely confident post draft with our team. We knew that we were capable of taking it all, and I'm just so happy, very happy that not only that we are done because I can take a break from Mons, but that I was able to get a lot of people their first victory in a team tour.
Actually, I'm pretty sure everybody on our team, this was their first DPL chip.
Yeah. And especially with especially for Keenan or K-Crick, he was working so hard all these DPL seasons.
Mans was starving for a chip.
All it took was not being the 1 seed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as a warning to people next season, do not get the 1 seed. It is cursed. It will screw you. But yeah, all jokes aside, we had our little announcement in the team server. We were shouting out all of our players. I think I had some messages for everybody. But yeah, I'm probably not gonna re-echo what I said there, since it's already been stated. But I'm hoping to see every one of our Wings members succeed in their future Mons endeavors, team tour endeavors, and maybe if we cross paths again as teammates, possibly as opponents, that we can relish the good memories we had this season, and yeah.
Also, Wings is retired. Wings will forever be a championship team. Nothing else will tarnish it. Wings as a team is retired.
one and done.
Yeah, one and done.
Yeah, we'll see if
we may be back. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Depends how viable Gen 9 is.
Yep. But yeah, with that, I'm about to head out of here. Thank you for listening. This was a long video. Thank you for watching.
Appreciate all of your support, and hope you enjoyed. And yeah, have a good rest of your day, afternoon, or evening.
Peace.